What does it mean to carve perfection from the bones of a dying empire? The question drifts like ash through the dark corridors of the 41st Millennium, whispered by warriors who no longer sleep, by priests who no longer doubt, and by machines that remember too much. It is a question born from fire and answered only in blood. And at the center of this unending whisper stands a new breed of soldier, taller, stronger, forged with purpose so precise it borders on sacrilege. They are the Primaris Space Marines, the Emperor's newest gamble in an age where hope is little more than a myth murmured by the dying. But to understand their arrival, one must first feel the weight of the cosmos pressing inward, an ancient empire fracturing under its own impossibility. Across a galaxy broken by war, a second great rift tears reality in two. Worlds are swallowed whole, faith is tested, the astronomicon flickers, and somewhere in the cold silence of a forgotten laboratory, a single luminous idea awakens. In that silence, Belisarius Cawl, tech priest, visionary, heretic in everything but name, moves beneath cathedral-sized machines that pulse with forbidden light. He has labored here for 10 millennia, hidden under the Emperor's dying command. No mortal soul should have endured such time, yet he remains half man, half machine, all obsession. He whispers to the dark as gene vaults hum around him, perfection. At last, within those vaults, cells divide under mechanical suns. Flesh grows like sculpted marble. Souls, or something close to them, shimmer in the amniotic glow of a new destiny. These are not simply Space Marines reborn. They are something else, something more. Warriors refined beyond the visions of the Emperor himself. But before they rise, the galaxy must crumble. The Indomitus Crusade will soon ignite. But first, there is the silence before the storm, the sound of a galaxy holding its breath. On a war-torn world known as Varnek's Gate, under a sky bruised by warp storms, the last surviving members of the Astra Militarum huddle behind the shattered remains of their fortress walls. The enemy presses in, mutants twisted by the warp, their forms flickering like broken reflections. Every night brings another assault. Every dawn fewer soldiers stand to see it. They whisper prayers to the Emperor, not expecting answers. And then the ground trembles. At first the soldiers believe it is another bombardment. But this sound is different, measured, thunderous, disciplined. Like the march of titans. Then the shadows fall across them, and a new kind of silhouette fills the horizon. Armored giants, tall even by Astartes standards, advance with perfect cohesion. Blue ceramite gleams beneath the storm, etched with sigils of a new crusade. Their eyes glow with cold, supernatural purpose. They do not shout, they do not roar. They simply advance, and the enemy breaks upon them like a wave against a monolith. Bolter fire-ups louder, sharper, heavier than any the guardsmen have heard. The rounds detonate with miniature suns, vaporizing mutants by the dozens. Shielding protocols flare to life in shimmering arcs. And at the front strides a warrior bearing the mark of the Ultramarines, his helmet crowned with a laurel of war. He is 3 meters tall. He moves as if his armor weighs nothing. He fires his bolt rifle with the precision of a calculated miracle. To the guardsmen, it feels like witnessing angels descend, but there is no divinity here. Only engineered perfection. When the final mutant falls, its body still steaming on the blood-drenched ground, the towering warrior turns toward the humans he has just saved. His voice is a deep, resonant echo, almost too calm for a battlefield. Stand, the Imperium still requires you. Some weep, others kneel, a few cannot even speak. They do not yet understand what they are seeing. Few do, for these warriors are strangers even to their own kind. Across the galaxy, chapters receive reinforcement cadres that appear like omens gleaming, disciplined, unsettling in their purity. Some accept them without question, some with suspicion, and some with fear. For if the Emperor's sons can be improved, what does that say of those who came before? Among the oldest chapters, those with memories etched deeper than any codex, the arrival of the Primaris is not merely a blessing. It is a reckoning. On Bile, scorched and nearly devoured by the Great Devourer, the Blood Angels witness these newcomers step onto their sacred soil. They move like statues brought to life, their every gesture wrapped in silent discipline. Yet when they kneel before Dante, Lord of the Blood Angels, an ancient unease lingers in the air. Do these warriors carry the curse of Sanguinius? Will they know the black rage, the madness that seizes their kin with visions of their Primarch's final moments? Or are they free of it, untouched by the tragedy that shapes every Blood Angel's soul? No one knows. Not yet. But whispers travel faster than truth in the Imperium. And soon rumors swirl that the Primaris do not dream, that their blood runs colder, that they were created not only to fight for the Imperium, but to surpass it. Yet while the galaxy murmurs and doubts, the storm only grows. The great rift widens, vomiting demons into real space like an birth of terror. Entire sectors vanish, warp tides swallow pilgrim ships whole. And amid this cosmic decay, Guilliman returns, Primarch reborn, commander resurrected in the Empire's darkest hour. To many, he is a miracle. To others, a threat. To the Primaris, he is father. But Guilliman sees his empire now with eyes burdened by truth. He walks among broken worlds and broken institutions, each one clinging to survival through ritual and fear. And as he stands atop the command dais of his flagship, he gazes at rows upon rows of newly awakened Primaris warriors, his legion reborn, yet unfamiliar. War will demand everything of you, he tells them. Even truths you are not yet ready to bear. A silence follows, heavy, electric. For in their creation lies a secret darker than the void outside. Cawl's work was not merely enhancement, not simply correction. It was evolution. And evolution has a price. But such doubts cannot pause the Imperium's march. Not now. The Indomitus Crusade ignites like a blade of burning faith. Fleets surge from newly fortified shipyards. Cathedra-sized engines roar with righteous fury. Worlds long abandoned are reclaimed in storms of fire and steel. And everywhere the Primaris march, the tide of war shifts. On the shattered world of Virali Prime, they descend in drop pods that burn bright as falling meteors. When the doors blast open, the air shudders with the release of Colossus-like figures. They charge into chaos-held trenches, their armor sparking with enemy fire, their fists crushing traitor ceramite like clay. To witness them is to witness war perfected, a grim symphony of violence executed with terrifying grace. And yet, beneath their precision lies an emptiness, a silence, a question left unanswered. Are they warriors or weapons? On the final night of the campaign, as the crimson moon hangs low above the ruined city, a single Primaris captain stands alone among the rubble. His armor is scarred, his helmet clutched at his side. The wind carries the scent of burnt stone and something older, something sour and malignant from the warp fissure pulsing nearby. He should feel victory. The city is reclaimed. The foe destroyed. The crusade pushes onward. But instead he feels hollow. In the flickering shadows, his enhanced senses detect something others cannot. A tremor beneath the ground. A whisper of unnatural static. A harmonic pulse that matches the rhythm of his two beating hearts. He moves deeper into the ruins, past collapsed temples and shattered aquilas. The echo grows stronger, stranger, almost familiar. At last he reaches a chamber half buried beneath the debris. Its walls are lined with sigils of the Mechanicus, long abandoned, half-eaten by rust. At its center lies a vault sealed silent, forgotten by all except time. But the vault's lock bears a symbol he recognizes. Not from training, not from memory, from instinct. It is the mark of creation, Cawl's mark. His pulse quickens. His breath thickens. Something within him, something engineered, responds. Then the vault door shifts, slowly, as if unlocking itself. The Primaris captain steps back, raising his rifle, but the air around him vibrates. For the first time in his engineered existence, he feels something akin to fear. A sliver of light breaks through the opening vault, cold, pale, impossible, and from the darkness within, a single mechanical whisper escapes. Protocol 7, awakened. The captain freezes, for he knows that phrase every Primaris does, though none speak of it, though none understand it. It is the one command buried too deep to question, and too dangerous to remember. The vault door grinds wider, dust spills forward. Something shifts in the shadows, something built long before he ever opened his eyes, and sealed for a reason Cawl never told anyone. Not even Guilliman, the Primaris captain's heart's thunder. The whisper comes again, clearer this time. Awaken the Legion. Phase 2 begins, and in that moment, as the chamber lights flicker to life, he realizes the truth. The Primaris were never the end of the Emperor's design. They were only the beginning. Darkness spills from the vault like a living storm, and the galaxy, already dying, shudders with a new, terrible possibility that the Imperium has just unlocked something it cannot control. The captain raises his weapon. The vault brightens, and the recording ends. The vault's awakening hum spread through the ruins like a pulse from a wounded god. Dust settled in trembling spirals as the Primaris captain held his rifle steady, the vault's pale light bleeding over his armor, turning its cobalt sheen into something ghostlier, colder. Within the Imperium, most truths were buried beneath ritual and scripture, but this one had been buried beneath steel. And steel, unlike faith, could corrode. Silence pressed against him, broken only by the faint mechanical breath coming from deep inside the vault. He could feel it, not with his senses, but with something woven into the marrow of his engineered bones. A call written into him long before he'd taken his first oath. Elsewhere on Virali Prime, miles above the buried heart of the city, a chaplain knelt atop a broken spire. His armor was scorched, his crosier slick with dried blood. The burning skyline stretched around him in jagged silhouettes. He whispered litanies into the smoke, but every prayer felt thinner than the last. The Imperium demanded certainty, but tonight's certainty felt like a crumbling temple. He sensed something shift in the warp, a tremor, faint but unmistakable, the kind that made faith quiver and shadows lengthen. He rose slowly, gripping his Rosarius as the wind screamed through broken glass. In the command bastion nearby, a Vox officer struggled to stabilize flickering hollow displays. Crusade data streams stuttered. Entire subsectors blinked in and out of the stratagem's light as warp interference gnawed at their signals. Fleet dispositions jittered. The air tasted of copper. A lieutenant leaned closer, voice tight. "Is it another surge?" "No," the Vox officer whispered. "This is different." Patterns in the static moved with unnatural rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Back in the vault chamber, the Primaris captain stepped forward as the door fully opened. Cold vapor spilled out, carrying the sterile scent of old laboratories, antiseptic layered atop ancient dust. Inside, suspended in luminescent tanks, were forms, not corpses, not warriors. Something between. They were humanoid, but incomplete. Unfinished, like sketches of soldiers waiting for the final stroke of a creator's hand. Tubes fed into their chests. Data sigils crawled across their dormant flesh. Then he saw the inscriptions carved into the vault walls. They were not Mechanicus runes. They were earlier, older, Terran, a language whispered only by archivists who feared their own knowledge. His heart stuttered. He reached out, running his gauntlet across a sigil etched with unnatural precision. Behind him, the vault's internal lights flared, reacting to his presence. The tanks vibrated. One of the dormant forms twitched. A memory no, an implanted directive flashed unbidden in his mind. A voice without a face. Phase 2 requires stability. They must not be awakened until... Static. Darkness. Silence. He stumbled back. The unfinished form in the nearest tank slowly turned its head. In the catacombs beneath the Basilica of St. Ramira, a confessor felt the tremor echo through the rock. Candles guttered. The faithful gathered for post-battle rites froze mid-prayer. A young acolyte looked up at the confessor with wide eyes. "Father, is it a sign?" The confessor lowered his censer, ash drifting like gray snowfall. "All things are signs," he murmured. "And not all herald salvation." He extinguished the candles one by one, leaving only the dim ember glow of incense burning in the dark. His hands shook, though he did not know why. High above the world, aboard the flagship of the Indomitus Crusade, Guilliman stood alone in the Stratageum. A macro display showed the slowly rotating galaxy fractured, bleeding from the rift. The Primarch stared at the scar of blue-white energy that bisected everything he had once sworn to protect. A tech adept approached, mechadendrites shifting nervously. "Lord Guilliman, there has been an anomaly in the Virali system. A warp breach?" "No, a data activation signal." One keyed to Call's encryption matrix. Something cold flickered in Guilliman's chest. "That protocol was not authorized. It was not sent," the adept corrected. "It awakened." Guilliman's hand tightened around the railing. Memories of Call's fragmented explanations haunted him, schematics he had not approved, contingencies he had not initiated, assurances whispered too quickly to be trusted. "Prepare an extraction force," Guilliman said, "and restrict all transmissions. Nothing leaves the system until I understand what Call has done." The adept bowed and hurried away. Alone again, Guilliman whispered soft, bitter, almost a prayer. "Father, what have we become?" The Primaris captain's situation worsened as the vault's interior lights reached full luminance. The tanks around him hissed, hydraulic locks disengaged. One by one, pale forms opened their eyes too bright, too aware for beings never meant to breathe open air. Then the chamber's Vox array activated, projecting a fractured recording across the room. Call's voice, distorted, layered over itself as though speaking across centuries. Protocol 7 will initiate only in the event of catastrophic strategic failure or premature awakening. Should either occur, Phase 2 must remain contained. Under no circumstances, should these prototypes enter operational theaters. Another layer of the recording bled through, more desperate. If they awaken early, the genetic cascade is unstable. They will not obey. The Primaris captain felt the words strike him like a bolter round. He raised his rifle again as the tank nearest him cracked open and fluid splashed across the stone floor. A figure stepped out, taller even than him. Its flesh was laced with metallic filaments, skin stretched over reinforced muscle, the face disturbingly serene. It blinked slowly, as though adjusting to existence. Then it looked at him. Not with curiosity, with recognition. Across the city above, the chaplain felt a weight drop into his soul. He swung his gaze toward the ruins where the captain had descended. Darkness pooled unnaturally around that place, as though the world itself recoiled. He whispered a single phrase, "Something has been unbound." Inside the command bunker, alarms screamed as interference spiked. Tactical readouts scrambled. Silhouettes of new, unidentified life signs appeared around the vault location, rapid, unnatural growth patterns flickering on and off the auspex. "Reinforcements needed at Sector 12, a sergeant barked. But the captain did not answer the Vox. He did not hear it. Because the prototype spoke. Its voice was soft, harmonic, layered with something synthetic. "You were not meant to see us." The captain steadied his weapon. "Identify yourself." "We have no names," it replied. "Only purpose. And your presence disrupts it." Another tank cracked open. Then another. Fluid soaked the floor, pooling around his boots like liquefied moonlight. He heard the faint hum in his bones again. Programming, gene-coded signals, a whisper meant only for him. "Phase 2 requires compliance." He forced the whisper down, burying it beneath discipline. "You will remain here," he commanded. By order of the Imperium, the prototype smiled. It was the first truly inhuman thing they did. "We have no need for the Imperium," the lights flickered. And something deeper than fear rooted itself in the captain's enhanced heart. Far above, in orbit, the tech adept standing beside the Howleth gasped. "My Lord Virali Prime's atmospheric readings are shifting. Energy signatures rising. There is something awakening across the entire southern hemisphere." Guilliman stepped forward. "What kind of signatures?" The adept hesitated. "Biotech," he whispered. "But not Xenos." A cold dread filled the Primarch's eyes. "Cawl." Back in the vault, the prototypes emerged fully from their tanks. Their movements were fluid, almost graceful. Too graceful. Not the rigid discipline of Astartes, but something closer to dancers shaped for war. Their bodies pulsed with faint internal light. "We are what comes after you," one murmured. The captain's finger tightened on the trigger. He did not notice the stone floor shift hairline fractures spreading outward from the vault like veins. The entire chamber vibrated. Machines buried beneath the ruins awoke for the first time in 10,000 years. Pale light bled through the cracks. Something enormous stirred beneath the city. And then all Vox channels across Virali Prime exploded with static. Every soldier, every priest, every commander, all heard the same whispered phrase, not from the prototypes, not from Guilliman, from somewhere much deeper. Phase 2. Initializing. The captain fired. The prototypes moved. The vault erupted in blinding light. And across Virali Prime, every piece of ancient machinery Cawl had left buried beneath its soil shuddered and powered on. 1,000,000 lights awakened in the dark. And the planet, faithful to the Imperium for 9,000 years, suddenly remembered a secret it had been forced to forget. The betrayal did not begin with a shot. It began with a heartbeat, one strong enough to shake the world. And for the first time since the Crusade began, the Imperium realized the danger was not only at its borders. It had been growing within its own blood. The world's heartbeat grew louder. Virali Prime shuddered as lights long dead flickered beneath its crust. The Primaris captain staggered back from the vault's explosion, helm alarms blaring, vision fractured by afterimages of pale figures moving with inhuman grace. Dust swirled around him like restless spirits. He fired again, bolter rounds cracking through the light, but the prototypes blurred aside, their movements too fluid, too precise, born not of training, but of design. Across the city ruins, guardsmen felt the tremor as the streets rippled under their boots. Statues of saints crumbled, windows shattered. The sky itself dimmed as clouds thickened unnaturally, twisting into patterns that looked almost like runes. Soldiers clutched their weapons, whispering prayers as if their breath might anchor reality in place. A chaplain raced toward the disturbance, Crozius crackling with caged lightning. His black helm reflected the burning city. He felt the Emperor's presence to him. It had always been a steady flame, but tonight it flickered like a dying lantern. He pressed onward despite the hollow ache forming in his chest, a dread that faith alone could not silence. Within the catacombs of the Basilica, the confessor gathered refugees shaken by the quake. Their voices trembled in unison as they recited litanies, hoping the familiar cadence might drown the rising sense of doom. Each syllable echoed strangely, as though the stone walls whispered back. The confessor touched the aquila on his robes and felt, for the first time, how cold it had become. High above the planet, Guilliman watched Auspec's readings spike into chaos. Signals emerged from subterranean structures across the southern hemisphere, structures he had not authorized, structures no Imperium archive acknowledged. He felt the shadow of Cawl's ambition lengthen like a blade. The Primarch's jaw tightened as the tech priests around him chanted diagnostics, their mechanical voices trembling despite their creed against fear. On Virali's eastern barricades, squads of Primaris intercessors stared at the horizon as fissures of light erupted from beneath the ground. The earth opened in wide plates, releasing mechanical constructs coated in dust. They rose like monuments, awakening towers of metal, faceless, humming with quiet purpose. The intercessors aimed weapons instinctively, unsure if they were witnessing reinforcements or their replacements. The prototypes approached the captain, stepping through smoke that curled lovingly around their frames. Their eyes reflected him-blue flecks of gene-seed perfection, mirrored in pale, unreadable depth. One extended a hand, not in peace, but in assessment. "You are incomplete," it whispered. A bridge between what was and what must be. He swung his rifle like a blade, forcing distance, but its grip caught the barrel effortlessly. Metal bent. The captain felt his pulse spike as its strength registered not as superior, but as ascending. In the command bunker, a lieutenant stared at shifting data. The heartbeats of the prototypes were transmitting across Vox channels not meant for biological signals. He heard them even without speakers, felt them thrumming inside his skull. He pressed his palms to his ears as whispers bled through. Phase 2. Unity of form, correction of flaw. The lieutenant collapsed, blood seeping from his nose. His last thought was a prayer for forgiveness, though he was unsure for what. The chaplain finally reached the vault ruins as a shockwave burst outward, hurling him into a collapsed wall. His armor groaned. He rose, vision blurred, and saw silhouettes in the white haze 3 figures standing over his captain. The prototypes turned toward him in perfect synchrony, as if one consciousness threaded through multiple bodies. He activated his Crozius, its field crackling like trapped lightning. "By the Emperor's will," he growled, "you will stand down." The prototypes tilted their heads, examining him the way a scholar examines a relic. "You cling to ritual," one said. "But ritual cannot stop evolution." The chaplain charged, faith roaring within him like a furnace. His Crozius struck the nearest prototype, and for a moment hope flared, until the blow halted as though hitting invisible resistance. Energy bled away. The prototype touched the Crozius, and its power field died as though smothered. Fear lanced the chaplain's heart. Deep in the Basilica catacombs, the confessor felt that fear as a psychic echo. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest. A terrible vision filled his mind. A world where Astartes stood silent while pale giants replaced them. A future where the Emperor's faithful were deemed obsolete by their own champions. He cried out, and the gathered refugees fell into panicked prayer. On the flagship, Guilliman's stratagem dimmed as astropaths screamed. One by one, their eyes turned black, their voices joining in a single eerie chant. The womb of metal, the children unfinished. The will forgotten, the father betrayed. Guilliman drew his blade, even though there was no enemy near. "Break the link," he commanded. Tech priests moved to comply, but their consoles sparked violently. Runes blurred into a single repeating glyph, the same symbol etched inside the vault. Call's symbol. Lightning struck Virali's spires as the prototype's presence warped the air. The captain staggered backward, coughing, armor alarms blaring warnings about proximity to unstable bioetheric signatures. He raised a combat knife, the simplest, most primitive weapon at his disposal, and the prototypes paused. "Not out of fear, out of curiosity. You resist," one said. "This is admirable. But resistance is a legacy of flawed design." Another stepped closer. Its skin pulsed faintly as the light flowed through its veins instead of blood. "We were not meant to be awakened here, but your presence triggered the sequence." The chaplain shielded the captain with his body. "You are abominations. We are correction." The prototypes lifted their hands, and the earth beneath them answered. Mechanical roots burst through the stone floor, wrapping around their legs like loyal serpents. The entire chamber lit with pale circuitry. For a moment, it felt like the world inhaled. Then everything changed. A psychic shockwave ripped outward. Guardsmen screamed as visions flooded them, visions of an Imperium without Space Marines, where towering pale warriors marched in perfect unity, cold and flawless, where faith was replaced by instruction, where humanity's imperfections were culled in silence. The confessor saw a machine throne without the Emperor, an empty seat worshipped by automatons. He wailed, clutching his aquila as it cracked in his hands. On the flagship, Guilliman staggered as the vision slammed into him. He saw Cawl bending over gene vaults, carving new warriors not just from the Emperor's designs, but from his own ambition. He saw the prototypes walking down endless halls beneath Mars. He saw a second legion being shaped in secret. A legion with no Primarch. A legion answerable only to Cawl. And then he saw something worse. He saw the Emperor's face, not in death, not in glory, but in disappointment. The Primaris captain collapsed to one knee as the shockwave receded. The prototype stood calm amidst the devastation, their expressions unchanged. One spoke softly, "Your era ends." Not by betrayal, but by necessity. He forced himself to his feet, fueled by defiance. "The Imperium will never accept you." The prototype smiled faintly. "The Imperium is not required." The ground shook violently. Across Virali Prime, Cawl's buried machines fully awakened. Monoliths rose from beneath the crust, forming patterns across the surface, patterns visible even from orbit. Guilliman's eyes widened as he recognized the design. It was not a fortress, not a factory, it was a signal. A beacon. Something was being called, or something was being invited. Alarms screamed across the flagship. Warp energy surged around Virali Prime like a tidal wave. The prototypes looked up, as if listening to a distant voice. "It begins," they whispered together. The chaplain dragged the captain back as the vault erupted into a column of light stretching skyward. And the last thing the captain heard, before the world dissolved into white, was a final whisper from the prototypes. "We were not the first." A shadow moved inside the light. Something larger, something older, something waking. And then the realization struck him. What they had awakened was not meant to improve the Imperium. It was meant to replace it. The world dissolved into white. Sound vanished first, swallowed by the rising column of light that tore through Virali Prime's sky. Then sensation faded, leaving the Primaris captain floating in a void between heartbeat and oblivion. When feeling returned, it was not gentle, it struck like a hammer. Gravity seized him, dragging him into a world reborn in fire and demonic wind. He collapsed onto scorched stone, vision flickering as afterimages danced across his helm display. The chaplain lay several meters away, armor cracked, Crozius dim. Around them, the ruins of the vault had been erased, replaced by a crater glowing with molten seams like the veins of some slumbering titan beneath the earth. The prototypes were gone. Not fled, ascended. The sky churned in unnatural spirals, clouds forming a colossal vortex that centered directly above the crater. Lightning crawled between clouds like serpents of fractured glass. Every bolt carried whispers, voices layered upon each other, in tones both familiar and impossibly alien. The captain forced himself upright, lungs burning. The air tasted of iron and ozone, thick with unspent promise and unspoken doom. His enhanced senses picked up the tremor beneath his boots, steady, rhythmic, growing stronger. Like footsteps. The chaplain rose slowly, leaning on his Crozius. He looked upon the crater with eyes that had seen too many heresies, yet nothing like this. The wind caught his cloak and tore it to ribbons, but he stood firm, reciting a litany not for victory, but for clarity. "What have they done?" he whispered. The answer came in a distant scream. Guardsmen fled through the ruins, their silhouettes twisting in the stormlight. Their Vox units crackled with chaotic transmissions, orders overlapping with prayers, warnings dissolving into sobs. A squad sergeant stumbled past, shouting, "The machines by Terra. They're waking across the entire sector. They're reshaping the land." Reshaping, not attacking. Not defending, reshaping, as though preparing the world for something else. The captain felt a chill sink deep into his engineered bones. "The prototypes are not our enemy," he said, voice hollow. "They're a signal." The chaplain's grip tightened. A signal to what? Thunder answered for him. Not natural thunder, something deeper, heavier. as though the atmosphere itself recoiled. Above, the vortex widened, revealing a void-dark sphere forming at its center. It pulsed like a heart. "We need to regroup," the chaplain said. "The Imperium must be warned." The captain did not move. He stared at the sphere above, something stirring in the farthest recesses of memory. An echo implanted during creation, a whisper he had ignored until now. "It's not a warp rift," he said quietly. "It's a gateway." The chaplain turned sharply. "To what realm?" The captain's breath shuddered. "Not the warp. Not a realm of chaos." He paused, as if the next words tasted wrong. "A realm of design." The chaplain stared at him in disbelief. What design can exist beyond the Emperor's? Before he could answer, a tremor raced through the ground. The monoliths rising across the planet shifted in unison, extending spires that aligned perfectly with the sphere in the heavens. Energy arced between them, forming a lattice of light across the horizon. The whole planet was becoming a key, and someone or something was turning it. In the catacombs of the basilica, the confessor was lifted from the floor as the world trembled. Candles exploded in bursts of crimson flame. He clutched his cracked aquila as if it were his last tether to sanity. He felt the Emperor's presence, and then felt it dim, not extinguished, but overshadowed by something vast and cold. A voice whispered inside his skull. Not demonic, not divine. "Correction!" he screamed until his throat tore. On the flagship above, Guilliman stood surrounded by flickering holo displays, showing Virali's changing surface. The energy patterns forming there were too precise to be natural, too flawless, even for Mechanicus constructs. "They are aligning the planet," a tech priest stammered. "Reformatting it." Guilliman's eyes hardened. "For what?" "I do not know, Lord. But it is not built for human life." The Primarch felt rage ignite within him, a rare, dangerous thing. He thought of Cawl's promises, spoken with mechanical calm. He thought of every assurance given, every secret withheld. "Prepare every available strike force," Guilliman commanded. "We descend now." "My lord," Amagos whispered. "The prototypes, what are they?" Guilliman turned slowly, voice heavy as a tomb seal. "A mistake that cannot be allowed to breathe." On the planet below, the captain and chaplain advanced through the storm. Monoliths erupted from the ground, each taller than a cathedral, each humming with cold energy. Their surfaces bore the same sigils the captain had seen in the vault symbols, now glowing with pale, merciless light. The chaplain breathed a prayer, but it felt small against the immensity rising around them. Thunder cracked, and the prototypes appeared again, emerging from a column of falling white light. They hovered inches above the ground, bodies now more illuminated than flesh. Their voices blended into a single harmonic tone. "We open the path." The captain stepped forward, rifle raised. His voice broke between fury and disbelief. "Why? For what purpose?" They answered without turning toward him. "For continuation." The chaplain's voice shook. "You would erase us? Replace us?" "No," they said gently. "You already replaced yourselves. We merely accelerate what you began." The sky darkened further as the sphere overhead expanded, revealing luminous shapes shifting inside. Not demons, not angels, architects. The prototypes lifted their arms in unison, and the monoliths echoed the gesture. Beams of energy shot from their peaks, striking the heart of the sphere. Reality rippled. Space peeled back like layers of silk. The captain felt his heart lurch. His vision blurred. Suddenly, he was no longer on Virali Prime. He stood in a memory that was not his. A vast chamber, golden light. A figure robed in light and shadow, the Emperor. But not as a dying god on a throne. As a creator, surrounded by towering shapes that resembled statues, or blueprints, or unborn legions. Then Cawl's voice whispered through the memory. They were meant for another age. Not this one. The vision shattered. The captain fell to one knee, gasping. The chaplain caught him, eyes wide with fear. "What did you see?" The captain looked at the vortex, tears he did not understand welling in his eyes. "Not replacements," he whispered. "Successors." The prototypes turned, as if hearing him. "We carry the Emperor's first design, unaltered, unrestricted, pure." The chaplain recoiled. "No mortal holds that truth. No mortal was meant to," they answered. Lightning split the sky. Guilliman's fleet pierced the atmosphere. The monolith lattice brightened. Something massive pushed against the thinning veil between realms. And in that moment, as the captain watched the world transform into a gateway, he realized the Emperor had once dreamed of a future without the Imperium. And now that future was knocking. Everything went silent. Every tremor stopped. Every storm paused. The vortex ceased spinning, frozen in perfect stillness. The prototypes raised their eyes toward the sphere. "It arrives." The captain and chaplain stood together, knowing this moment would forever divide history. And then, just before the shape inside the sphere stepped through, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The bridge fell silent the moment the warning runes died. It was a silence so deep, it felt like the ship itself was holding its breath. Tiberius stood at the center of it, feeling the tremor in the deck plates as the fleet shifted formation, as if preparing for a verdict they had already sensed. The light around him dimmed to the color of dying embers, and for a heartbeat he wondered if the machine spirit was mourning. Then the Vox began to whisper again, that same broken voice, neither completely human nor entirely dead. The words were clearer now, not a warning, a confession. Behind him, the Primaris warriors did not move. They stood like statues carved from midnight, their armor reflecting the faint glow of failing lumen strips. No fear, no hesitation. Only the cold patience of beings who knew the galaxy would burn long after they were ash. Tiberius listened. The message spoke of a star gone dark, a citadel swallowed whole, a Primaris design altered by hands unseen. And then buried under distortion, a name he had never heard, yet felt he had always known. A name that tasted like ashes and inevitability. The message ended with a single distorted heartbeat. Lexicanium Real spoke first. His voice was low, strained, as though the psychic echo of the transmission still clung to his skull. He said that the resonance within the message was impossible. It carried traces of gene echoes unique to the Ultima founding, but layered with something older. Something that should not exist. Something that had watched them long before they were made. The thought slithered through the command deck, like a shadow given form. The Tech Marines muttered Benhuruk prayers under their breath, as if hoping to drown the moment in ritual. Even the Primaris warriors shifted slightly, as though instinct warned them of a truth too heavy to grasp. In the viewing bay, the stars elongated. The ships began their burn toward the dead system, the system named in the signal. A world once recorded as uninhabited. A world now marked with a classification seal so heavily redacted it resembled a wound. The Reclusiarch approached Tiberius, his skull helm dimly lit by the flicker of lumen candles. He spoke of prophecy, not the sanctioned ones recorded in the Libraria, but the forbidden fragments whispered by chaplains who had stared too long into the abyss and returned shivering. Prophecies of the Emperor's new warriors carrying a flaw not of flesh, but of purpose. Tiberius asked him what kind of flaw. The Reclusiarch only tightened his grip on his Crozius. One that chooses its moment. They said nothing more. Hours passed. The fleet closed in on the dead world. A sphere of gray dust and broken continents, orbiting a star that looked wrong. Its light stretched and twisted as though refusing to illuminate the planet beneath it. The augurs found no cities, no ruins, no signals. And yet every psychic aboard the ship felt the surface crawling with unspoken memory. Dropships descended. The dust storms parted as the gunships pierced the atmosphere. The land below resembled the bones of a giant creature torn apart eons ago. Glass plains, cracked mountain spines. Rivers of ash, no life, no war. Only the aftermath of something that did not have the courtesy to leave its corpse behind. Tiberius stepped from the ramp with his squad surrounding him. The ground crunched beneath their boots like the remnants of lost civilizations. The wind howled without warmth. There were no structures, but they felt watched by walls that no longer existed. A faint pulse shuddered through the soil. Riel knelt, pressing a gauntlet hand to the ground. He said the planet was remembering them. But memories, true memories, did not behave like this. They should not respond. They should not whisper. Yet they did. The pulse grew stronger. The dust parted around Tiberius's step, as though the world recognized him. The air thickened with the weight of a secret buried beneath 1,000 false histories. And then, barely visible beneath a thin layer of ash, Tiberius saw it. A symbol, a perfect circle, 2 intersecting lines. A mark etched with precision. The symbol of an archaic genetic schematic. One used only in the earliest prototypes of Primaris augmentation, before Guilliman himself had refined the process. But the mark was older than the Imperium. Riel hissed sharply. He began to recite denials, litanies, counter-incantations to steady his mind, but his voice cracked because the realization was impossible. No prototype Primaris had ever been tested outside the vaults of Mars or the secret forges of Belisarius Cawl, and yet the symbol beneath their feet had been carved into the surface of this world millennia ago. The storm intensified, as if reacting to their understanding. Dust coiled into spirals, forming shapes that resembled armored giant Staller, broader, bearing armor that looked eerily familiar, proto-Primaris, but their helmets were marked with sigils no Imperial record contained. Their silhouettes flickered like ghosts trapped in a repeating memory. One lifted a spectral weapon, not bolter nor plasma, but something between the two, heavy with energy yet oddly graceful. Another raised a hand, as though warning them. Tiberius approached. He felt his gene seed tighten inside him, as though the very essence of his being recoiled or remembered. The spirits collapsed into dust. Riel staggered. He whispered that the echoes were not Xenos, not warp-born, not psychic illusions. They were gene echoes, residual imprints left by beings who shared their genetic lineage. Not descendants, ancestors. The realization hit them like orbital bombardment. Before Guilliman, before Cawl, before the Imperium as they knew it, something had made warriors like them. Something had made them and then erased itself from history. The wind died. The sky darkened further. The star above flickered as though suffocating. And then the ground split open in a slow, deliberate motion, like a lock turning after thousands of years of silence. A structure rose from the depths. Not Gothic, not Mechanicus. Smooth metal, seamless, uncorroded despite ages of burial. Its surface pulsed with a light identical to the distorted heartbeat in the transmission. A doorway formed. The Primaris warriors tensed, weapons ready. Tiberius stepped forward alone. Inside, the air tasted like ancient data and sterilized sorrow. Lights activated in a sequence, illuminating a vast chamber lined with stasis pods, hundreds, perhaps thousands. Most were empty, some were shattered. And at the far end, one pod remained sealed, its surface fogged from within. A figure floated inside, massive, armored, bearing features too familiar to deny. Tiberius felt his breath stall. The face inside the pod was a distorted reflection of his own lineage, as though someone had designed him using this template. But the armor was older, the musculature denser, and the sigils etched into the plating were unlike anything used in the Imperium. A plaque at the base displayed a single designation: Proto-Primaris Unit, 00 Alpha created. Unknown purpose. Redacted termination. Unconfirmed. The chamber trembled. Riel shouted that something was waking, something psychic, something reaching through the gene seed of every Primaris on the planet. The heartbeat returned, no longer distorted, not machine, not memory, alive. The stasis pod began to crack. The light in the chamber shifted from cold blue to a deep, pulsing crimson. Tiberius felt a presence press into his mind, not hostile, but ancient and heavy with expectation. as though it recognized him the way a parent recognizes a child. Outside, the ground shook. Thunder rolled across the horizon. The fleet above reported a massive energy surge rising from the planet's core. The cracks grew wider. The figure opened its eyes, golden, burning, human, but not human. The pod split open, and in the instant before the being took its first breath in 10,000 forgotten years, Tiberius finally understood the message that had been hiding beneath the distortion. We were not the first. We will not be the last. And the truth beneath our creation is waking. The chamber went white, and everything changed. The chamber's white brilliance receded slowly, like the last breath of a dying star, leaving behind a hush so profound it felt almost sacred. Where the stasis pod had been, only drifting motes of luminescence remained, fading like the remnants of a dream. Tiberius stood unmoving at the center of the dissolving light, his silhouette carved in stillness, as though the universe itself hesitated to disturb the moment that followed. The figure Unit Alpha had not stepped forward. It had not spoken, it had simply passed through them, a presence more than a form, a memory more than a being. For one impossible heartbeat, it overshadowed every Primaris on that forsaken world, a vast echo resonating through their blood, their thoughts, their purpose. It didn't command, it didn't ask. It simply showed them what they were and what they were not. Then it vanished, pulled upward in a column of pale radiance that pierced the chamber roof without breaking it, ascending into the starless sky like the soul of a forgotten god, returning to a heaven that no longer remembered it. The silence after its departure was overwhelming. Even the wind outside had died, as though the planet itself were grieving. Rail sank to one knee, his psychic aura dimmed to a trembling flicker. He whispered that the presence had not meant harm, only remembrance. A remembrance so ancient, it felt like standing before the first echo of humanity's forgotten dawn. He confessed he did not understand it. He doubted anyone ever would. The Reclusiarch arrived moments later, but even he, the voice of unwavering faith, spoke in quiet, unsteady tones. He said that what they had witnessed could neither be sanctified nor condemned. It belonged to a truth so old that Scripture had long since turned its back on it, burying it under 10,000 layers of doctrine and fear. Tiberius did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on the fading motes drifting upward into the cracked ceiling, as though hoping they might return and offer even a fragment of meaning. But only the dust remained, settling on his armor like the last ash of a dying pyre. They left the chamber without ceremony. The doorway sealed itself behind them, sinking once more into the earth, as though the planet wished to forget what it had revealed. The fissures in the ground shrank, the winds resumed their mournful howl, and the skies regained their oppressive dimness. It was as if the world swallowed its own confession and exhaled only desolation. The march back to the gunships felt heavier than any battle. Each Primaris carried within them weight that armor could not bear and bolter fire could not ease. They did not speak. They did not need to. The silence between them had become a shared language, forged in the glow of an impossible revelation. In orbit, the fleet awaited answers. None came. The stratagem flickered with anxious demands, requests for scans, calls for clarity. Tiberius responded with the only truth he could offer. The anomaly had ceased, the threat had passed, and the world held no strategic value. He did not mention the chamber. He did not mention the symbol. He did not mention Unit Alpha. Some truths were too large to name. As the fleet prepared to depart, the star above the planet dimmed for the last time. It collapsed inward silently, shedding no brilliance, giving no final flare, only fading, like a candle smothered by unseen hands. The dead planet followed suit, cracking along hidden seams before imploding into a cloud of gray dust that drifted apart without light or sound. Where the world had been, only a cold void remained. Real claimed it was not destruction, it was erasure. A deliberate wiping clean of a design too ancient and too dangerous to endure in the age of Imperium. Tiberius said nothing, but he felt the truth of it. That planet had not died, it had been dismissed. The return voyage to Imperial territory felt unreal. The stars seemed dimmer, the void more hollow. Even the hum of the ship's engines carried a subdued tremor, as if the machine spirit were unsettled by something it could not quantify. Days passed, then weeks. The event became a shadow, then a scar, then a memory they could not speak aloud. And yet each warrior felt a lingering echo within their gene seed, a faint pulse that resonated when the lights dimmed or when the ship drifted past uncharted stars. Not a command, not a flaw, simply awareness. The awareness of being part of something far older than the Imperium's recorded history. Tiberius found himself wandering the observation deck more often, staring at the slow drift of nebulae like a pilgrim searching for meaning in smoke and starlight. He wondered if Unit Alpha had been a beginning or an ending, a warning or a promise, a remnant of forgotten architects or the precursor to something still yet to come. The Reclusiarch joined him once, standing beside him in silence. He finally spoke in a voice stripped of all theatrics and scripture, sounding instead like an old warrior confronting the limits of faith. He asked Tiberius a question that lingered long after he left. If we were shaped by hands no longer here, who then do we truly serve? Tiberius had no answer. Days later, as the fleet slipped through the last stretch of warp toward Imperial stars, Rael experienced a vision in his sleep, a single image, brief as a heartbeat. He described it in the morning to Tiberius in a voice still shaking. He saw the Emperor's golden throne. He saw Guilliman kneeling before it. And for a fraction of a second, behind them both, he saw the silhouette of Unit Alpha tall, silent, watching with eyes of gold that flickered like dying suns. Then it was gone. The librarian admitted he did not know if it was a psychic message or simply the mind's way of wrestling with something too vast. But he feared what it implied, that even the highest truths of the Imperium might be only fragments of a greater, hidden architecture. That the Emperor himself might have inherited a legacy older than mankind. That the Primaris might not be the final ascension, but merely the rediscovery of an abandoned path. The fleet emerged into real space above a world burning with the light of constant bombardment, a war zone, a place in need of salvation, or perhaps only a slower death. The Vox came alive, begging for reinforcements, pleading for any hope at all. Duty swallowed doubt. Purpose silenced fear. The Primaris descended once more into fire and ruin, their boots striking the soil of a world dying for the Imperium. And though their hearts carried the echo of the ancient chamber, and their gene seed thrummed with unspoken memory, they fought as they had been made to fight, without hesitation, without question, with valor that defied despair. Tiberius led the charge. His blade rose through smoke and gore, carving a path for those behind him. The thunder of bolters drowned the whisper of forgotten truths. The screams of heretics masked the quiet pulse within his blood. He fought because he must, because there was no other path, because the galaxy devoured hesitation. Yet in a brief moment between volleys, as the battlefield paused for breath, he looked up at the sky ashen, burning, uncaring. And he wondered if creation itself carries secrets older than faith, if the Emperor's grand design rests upon foundations never meant to be seen, what then is the price of survival? The war swallowed the moment, but the question remained quiet, solemn, eternal, whispered through the endless night of the 41st Millennium. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a golden eye opened and closed. If you felt the weight of this journey through the grim darkness of the far future, then like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice strengthens the chapter.